This story was sent in by Claire M. from New England. I've lived alone since 2020, and for the most part, I like it. My place is a small, older rental tucked in a quiet neighborhood that gets dark fast in the winter. By midnight, the whole street usually feels like it's gone to sleep. I've always been the type to triple-check locks anyway, but living alone has made that habit even stronger. I do a little lap every night before bed, front door, back door, windows, the whole routine. The night this happened, it was a little after midnight. I remember because I had looked at the clock on my stove while making tea. It had been one of those dry, cold evenings where every sound in the house carries, and I couldn't settle down enough to sleep, so I ended up on the couch with a book. The only lights on were a small lamp next to me and the glow from the oven clock in the kitchen. Nothing about the night felt unusual until I noticed something small. My cat, Milo, kept staring toward the front hallway. Not moving, not twitching, just fixed in that direction with his ears angled back. He's normally pretty lazy at night, so the way he locked onto the hallway stood out to me. At the time I told myself he probably heard a squirrel outside or something, but that detail ended up mattering a lot more than I realized. Around 12:15, just as I was turning a page, I heard 3 slow knocks on my front door. They weren't loud. Honestly, they sounded like someone was trying not to disturb the neighbors but still wanted to get my attention. Very deliberate. A knock, a few seconds, another knock, then another. I froze. I wasn't expecting anyone, and nobody in my life just drops by unannounced at midnight. My first thought was that it had to be a mistake. Wrong house, maybe, or someone delivering something to the wrong address. But the knocking pattern, soft but intentional, didn't feel like that. I didn't move at first. I just sat there and listened, hoping whoever it was would walk away. After about 15 seconds of silence, I quietly set my book down and switched off the lamp. The room dropped into darkness, except for the little clock glow from the kitchen. I waited. Almost immediately, the knocking started again. This time, it was slightly louder. Not pounding, but more confident, like the person realized I hadn't come to the door and wanted to make sure I heard them. I got up slowly and padded barefoot across the living room toward the hallway, keeping close to the wall so the floorboards wouldn't creak. I didn't go right up to the door. I stayed halfway down the hall, but I listened hard. Whoever was on the other side didn't say a word. No movement, no shuffling, no footsteps in the snow outside, just that awful sense of someone being there. For a minute or so, I went back and forth in my head about what to do. Part of me wondered if maybe it was a neighbor who needed help, or some confused delivery driver. But the deliberate quietness of it didn't fit. If someone truly needed something, they'd call out. They'd try the doorbell. They'd knock normally. This wasn't that. Finally, my nerves got the best of me. I slipped back into the living room, crouched behind the couch where I couldn't be seen from the front windows, and called 911. I kept my voice as quiet as I could. The dispatcher asked if I could see who was at the door. I told her no, and that I didn't want to get close enough to check. While I was on the phone, the knocking stopped again. Not gradually, not fading, just stopped, as if the person froze the second I dialed. Those few minutes waiting for the police felt like they stretched on forever. I kept expecting the knocking to start again, maybe louder, maybe more impatient. I kept glancing toward the hallway, thinking I might see the doorknob turn or a shadow under the frame. At one point, I realized Milo wasn't by my feet anymore. He had hidden under the couch. That spiked my fear all over again. A few minutes later, I heard a car roll up slowly outside, followed by a quick flash of red and blue reflecting against the walls. The dispatcher stayed on the phone until the officers knocked and announced themselves. When I finally opened the door, the cold rushed in. The officers checked around the porch, the walkway, and the street. They didn't see anyone. They didn't see footprints leading away either, which confused me. I had heard the crunch of snow when I walked earlier that evening. The only prints were the ones I recognized from my own comings and goings. They were kind about it. They took a quick statement, looked around the yard with flashlights, but eventually said there wasn't much else they could do since whoever it was had already left. They suggested keeping lights on outside and calling again if anything else happened. Nothing else did. not that night. But something about the silence they left behind bothered me more than the knocking. It was like the whole neighborhood had gone hollow. The officers drove off, and for the first time, the house felt too big for just me. I barely slept. Every little sound made me sit up. I kept replaying the knocking in my head, the slow rhythm, the slight increase in volume the second time, the complete silence afterward. And I kept thinking about Milo staring down the hallway before any of it started, like he sensed someone outside before I heard them. The next day I checked the porch in daylight. Still no prints, no signs of anyone standing there, just my doormat slightly crooked, which I don't remember leaving that way. Since that night, I don't sit in the living room after dark without at least one more light on. I added an extra deadbolt to the front door and put a small security camera above the porch. I don't think I'll ever forget the sound of those quiet, deliberate knocks or the feeling that someone was standing on the other side, waiting for me to come closer. And even now, sometimes around midnight, I catch myself holding my breath, listening for it to happen again.